Beneath Naples' bustling streets lies the Fontanelle Cemetery, a vast ossuary housing the remains of approximately 40,000 victims of the 1656 plague and later cholera epidemics, where a unique cult of devotion to anonymous human remains developed in the late 19th century. Historical records show that in 1872, Father Gaetano Barbati organized local women to clean and arrange the chaotic mass of bones, inadvertently initiating what became known as the cult of the anime pt.83, cult of the poor souls. Devotees would adopt specific skulls, believing they contained the souls of individuals requiring care to complete their journey to the afterlife. Anthropological studies document elaborate rituals where devotees would clean their chosen skulls weekly, adorn them with handmade veils or floral offerings, and light specific prayer candles believed to illuminate the soul's path. The practice became so widespread that by 1900, nearly every skull had acquired a dedicated caretaker, with waiting lists for particularly powerful remains. Archival photographs show elaborate shrines constructed around certain skulls, particularly those believed to belong to young women or children. Medical analysis of the remains reveals fascinating biological information, evidence of nutritional deficiencies consistent with lower socioeconomic status, dental pathologies indicating limited access to care, and skeletal markers of occupational stress from physical labor. The devotional practices reached their peak during the devastation following World War II, when Neapolitans suffering from extreme hardship would seek specific skulls believed to provide winning lottery numbers through dreams. While officially discouraged by the Catholic Church since 1969, marine biologists have documented a haunting acoustic phenomenon produced by dying whales, a distinct vocalization pattern termed the death song that differs markedly from all other known cetacean communications. First recorded comprehensively in 2009, using sophisticated hydrophone arrays, these vocalizations occur specifically when whales are in terminal decline, particularly during mass stranding events. Acoustic analysis reveals these songs contain frequencies between 5 to 200 Hz, significantly lower than normal communication patterns, and follow a specific decreasing pitch pattern that typically spans 2 to 5 minutes in duration. Tissue samples from whales producing these vocalizations show elevated levels of specific neurotransmitters associated with awareness of mortality in mammals. Most intriguing is the documented response from other pod members, who form specific geometric patterns around the dying whale, typically a circular formation with younger members positioned furthest from the vocalizing individual. Tracking data from tagged whales shows these death songs can trigger responses from conspecifics up to 15 miles away, suggesting they serve as important community signals. Neurological studies using non-invasive EEG readings from stranded whales producing these vocalizations show unique brain activity in the cetacean equivalent of the limbic system, areas associated with emotional processing in mammals. The songs appear to serve multiple biological functions, alerting pod members to dangerous areas or conditions, transferring crucial ecological knowledge before death, and potentially facilitating social bonds through shared mourning behaviors. Analysis of recordings from different species shows remarkable similarities in the fundamental structure of these vocalizations. Within Yellowstone National Park lies a geological feature with a gruesome distinction: hot springs so chemically caustic they can dissolve human tissue to bone within 24 to 36 hours. The most notorious Norris Geyser Basin contains waters with pH levels approaching 1.5, comparable to battery acid, combined with temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Fahrenheit, 93 degrees Celsius. Park ranger records document at least 22 confirmed fatalities, where bodies were substantially dissolved before recovery could occur. Chemical analysis reveals these springs contain a unique combination of sulfuric acid, hydrogen chloride, and various metal chlorides that create ideal conditions for rapid tissue dissolution. The specific microbial communities that thrive in these extreme environments, particularly Sulfolobus acidicaldarius, produce enzymes capable of breaking down organic proteins at a rate that industrial chemical processes cannot match. Forensic studies following a 2016 incident revealed that complete skeletonization occurred in less than 30 hours, roughly 8 times faster than would occur in normal aquatic environments. Park safety officials have documented that the surface appearance of these pools can be particularly deceptive. Beautiful turquoise waters with seemingly solid ground surrounding them that actually consists of thin mineral crusts covering boiling acidic water. According to incident reports, some victims who fell through these crusts remained conscious for 30 to 45 seconds while submerged in the caustic water, experiencing rapid chemical burns throughout their bodies before losing consciousness. The Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles, constructed between 1678 and 1684, houses 357 mirrors that court documents suggest were linked to a disturbing number of deaths among their craftsmen. Historical records from Louis XIV's court indicate that 17 of the Venetian master glassmakers who created these mirrors died within a year of completing their work, leading to persistent rumors of a curse. Modern analysis of the manufacturing process reveals these craftsmen used mercury tin amalgam to create the reflective backing, a technique that would have exposed them to lethal levels of mercury vapor in the confined workshops. Contemporary medical accounts describe craftsmen suffering symptoms consistent with acute mercury poisoning, tremors, psychological disturbances, and eventual organ failure. The mirrors themselves contain approximately 1.5 kilograms of mercury each, meaning the entire hall contains over 500 kilograms of this toxic metal. Particularly unsettling are the detailed records kept by the royal physician, documenting cases of glassmakers who became convinced they could see faces other than their own in the mirrors they created, a known neurological symptom of mercury poisoning that likely contributed to the curse mythology. Visitor accounts from the 18th century describe courtiers avoiding certain mirrors where individuals had died while gazing at their reflection, particularly during the smallpox epidemic of 1774 that claimed numerous victims within the palace. The San people of southern Africa have refined one of the world's deadliest hunting technologies, arrows tipped with a neurotoxic compound derived from Diamphidia beetle larvae that can kill a 1,000-pound antelope within hours. This poison, known as gua in the San language, contains diamphitoxin, a compound that attacks nerve tissue with such precision that modern pharmaceutical researchers continue studying it for potential medical applications. Ethnographic studies reveal the meticulous preparation process. The larvae are harvested specifically during winter months when toxin concentration reaches its peak, then carefully dried and ground with precise amounts of plant extracts that serve as binding agents. Chemical analysis shows the completed poison contains at least 22 distinct compounds working synergistically, with the primary toxin causing progressive paralysis that gradually affects the respiratory system. The San hunter-gatherers have developed specialized knowledge of toxicology that includes understanding how the poison's potency varies based on the beetle's diet and habitat. Archaeological evidence from rock art dating back 24,000 years shows depictions of this hunting method, making it one of humanity's oldest continuously practiced hunting techniques. Medical researchers have documented the poison's remarkable stability. Properly prepared toxin remains potent for up to 2 years when stored in ostrich eggshell containers traditionally used by San hunters. Perhaps most remarkable is the San's development of several antidotes derived from plant sources that can counteract the poison if accidentally exposed. The Saharan silver ant, Cataglyphus bombycina, exhibits one of nature's most peculiar end-of-life phenomena, a distinct acoustic emission in its final moments that researchers have termed the death rattle. This sound, first documented by entomologists in 1998, occurs only in the moments preceding death and produces an audible high-pitched vibration measuring between 14 to 18 kilohertz, just within the range of human hearing, microbiological examination reveals. This sound results from a unique structural collapse in the ant's exoskeleton. Their bodies contain specialized triangular microstructures, layered over one another like roof tiles, which normally reflect sunlight and heat, allowing these ants to survive surface temperatures exceeding 70 degrees Celsius. When death approaches, muscular contractions cause these structures to rapidly separate and vibrate against one another, producing the characteristic sound. High-speed video analysis at 2000 frames per second shows these microstructures oscillating at precisely 15,340 times per second during the phenomenon. Remarkably, this sound appears to serve an evolutionary purpose. Experimental studies demonstrate that the specific frequency triggers an immediate alarm response in nearby colony members, causing them to evacuate the area, potentially avoiding whatever danger killed the first ant. Chemical analysis of ants during this process indicates a specific pheromone release that occurs simultaneously with the acoustic signal, creating a multisensory warning system. In the cemetery of San Bernardo, Colombia, at an elevation of 1,800 meters in the Andes Mountains, a medical anomaly has turned grief into wonder. Naturally mummified children's bodies, preserved with skin, facial features, and even hair intact decades after burial. First documented in 1957 when graves were relocated during cemetery expansion, these preserved remains, locally called santos or saints, now number over 24, displayed in glass cases, where their perfectly preserved features appear merely sleeping rather than deceased. Microbiological analysis attributes this preservation to a unique combination of factors: the region's specific soil chemistry, which contains high ionic concentrations of certain minerals, levels of aluminum oxide and calcium phosphate, atmospheric conditions with precisely balanced humidity, and constant cool temperatures with minimal fluctuation. Tissue samples examined by pathologists show remarkably intact cellular structures, with dermal layers showing minimal bacterial decomposition compared to control samples. Most striking is the preservation of ocular tissues, typically among the first to decompose, with several specimens retaining intact irises with recognizable original coloration. Medical researchers have noted that this natural preservation occurs predominantly in children who died from respiratory ailments, suggesting a possible connection between certain medications administered before death and the subsequent preservation process. Local medical records indicate many of these children received treatments containing aluminum-based compounds shortly before death, potentially creating internal chemical conditions that facilitated preservation. Beneath Jerusalem's Old City, particularly in the network of ancient tunnels running alongside the Western Wall, a peculiar phenomenon has been documented since at least the 12th century: stones that appear to weep with a reddish fluid resembling blood, particularly during times of conflict or disease. Historical records from the Crusader period contain the first written accounts of this phenomenon, with Knights Templar documents describing stones that shed the blood of martyrs during the siege of Jerusalem. Scientific analysis conducted by Israeli geologists in the 1990s revealed that these tears contain high concentrations of iron oxide and magnesium, minerals present in the limestone that can be drawn to the surface through microfractures when ambient humidity rises above 75%, conditions that often coincide with seasonal changes that historically brought conflicts and disease outbreaks. Particularly notable is the documented weeping that occurred during the 1929 Palestine riots, when multiple witnesses reported fluid flowing from specific sections of wall that had been dry for decades. Samples collected during a 2008 occurrence were analyzed using mass spectrometry, revealing trace biological compounds that remain unexplained. The phenomenon is most frequently observed in the oldest sections of masonry, dating to the Herodian period, 37 to 4 BCE, specifically blocks weighing between 5 to 8 tons that form the lowest courses of the wall. Religious scholars note that these occurrences often coincide with significant dates in the Hebrew calendar, particularly Tisha B'Av, which commemorates the destruction of both ancient temples. The Sahara Desert harbors one of archaeology's most unsettling discoveries: perfectly preserved shipwrecks complete with skeletal crews stranded hundreds of miles from any existing water source. In 1987, archaeologists documented a 9th century merchant vessel near the Ahagar Mountains in southern Algeria, its wooden hull remarkably intact due to the arid conditions, with skeletons found still clutching navigational tools in their final positions. Geological analysis reveals these vessels sailed what was once the Lake Megachad system, a massive inland sea that began drastically shrinking around 5000 BCE due to climate changes that transformed fertile coastlines into deserts. desert in a geological instant. Pollen samples extracted from these shipwrecks show evidence of rapid environmental collapse, layers indicating lush vegetation abruptly replaced by sand particles within the same sediment level. Analysis of skeletal remains indicates many crews died from dehydration while awaiting rescue as water sources rapidly disappeared. The preservation quality is so exceptional that researchers have recovered intact rope rigging, leather goods, and even food stores containing desiccated figs and cereals. Most haunting are the documented final messages, inscriptions carved into hull planks or personal items by dying crew members, including one translated from ancient Berber that reads, "The water goes away, the birds have followed, we remain." Satellite imaging has identified potential locations of dozens more vessels buried beneath the dunes, suggesting a catastrophic climate event that stranded entire trading fleets simultaneously. In the isolated communities of medieval Iceland, a particularly macabre form of sorcery emerged: nabrok, or necropants, leggings crafted from the skin of deceased men that were believed to produce endless wealth for their wearers. According to the Guldrubok, a 17th-century Icelandic grimoire, the creation process required permission from a living man to use his skin after death. Once the individual died, the sorcerer would exhume the body, carefully flay the lower body from waist to feet, in one unbroken piece, and then cure the skin using specific techniques that prevented decay. Historical records from 1656 in northern Iceland document specialized tools developed specifically for this purpose, curved cutting implements that allowed for seamless removal. The most disturbing aspect of this practice involved using fat rendered from the same corpse to fuel a special lamp used during the creation ritual. Chemical analysis of residue found on suspected nabrok artifacts at the Museum of Icelandic Sorcery and Witchcraft indicates human adipose tissue mixed with sheep tallow, likely to extend the limited supply of human fat. According to folklore, detailed in the Holmavik manuscripts, the macabre trousers would magically bond to the wearer's skin, and a stolen coin placed in the scrotal sac would mysteriously multiply if specific incantations were recited during the new moon. Court records from 17th-century witchcraft trials mention nabrok in at least 7 cases, suggesting the practice was uncommon but recognized enough to merit legal attention. The preserved tattooed heads of Maori warriors known as mokomokai represent a complex intersection of sacred cultural practice and colonial exploitation. The traditional preservation process, developed centuries before European contact, involved removing the brain and eyes, sealing all orifices with flax fiber and gum, boiling or steaming the head, smoking it over an open fire, and finally treating it with shark oil. Anthropological studies reveal that authentic mokomokai can be identified by distinctive shrinkage patterns and the positioning of the moko facial tattoo, which becomes more defined during the preservation process as the skin contracts. Originally, these preserved heads served several cultural purposes: honoring revered ancestors, preserving the identities of important tribal members, and commemorating enemies slain in battle whose heads were taken as trophies. Historical records from Captain James Cook's 1770 expedition document the first European observations of mokomokai, noting their significance in tribal negotiations and peace settlements. However, by the 1820s, European demand for these specimens created a disturbing trade. Colonial documents reveal that mokomokai could fetch prices equivalent to 500 muskets, creating incentive for what became known as the Musket Wars, where tribes raided others specifically to create more heads for trading. Analysis of trading company ledgers from 1820 to 1831 shows over 450 preserved heads were exported to European museums and private collections, with particularly high concentrations in British and French institutions. In 17th-century Switzerland, an unusual timepiece emerged from master clockmakers' workshops, the memento mori death clock, a precision instrument designed not just to measure hours but to count down to its owner's predetermined death. These macabre timepieces, crafted primarily in Geneva and Zurich between 1650 and 1720, featured intricate skull motifs with articulated jaws that would slowly close as the predicted death date approached. Horological records from the Swiss Watchmakers Guild document that these clocks required their owners to undergo a physical examination, by a physician who would estimate their remaining lifespan based on family history, constitution, and existing ailments. This death prediction would then be mechanically programmed into the clock using specialized gearing systems unique to each timepiece. The clock faces typically displayed both standard time and remaining time, with some models incorporating additional indicators for celestial alignments believed to influence health and longevity. Historical documents show these clocks were particularly popular among wealthy merchants and bankers who used them as planning tools for business succession and estate distribution. Surviving examples, housed primarily in the Patek Philippe Museum and private collections, reveal sophisticated mechanical innovations, including temperature compensation systems to ensure accuracy across seasons and specialized dampers to maintain consistent operation even as the mainspring unwound. Period diaries from owners describe the psychological effects of living with these precision reminders of mortality. Archaeological excavations of Han Dynasty tombs, 206 BCE, 220 CE, have uncovered a peculiar and disturbing phenomenon: shattered jade burial suits and fractured stone sarcophagi, evidence of what researchers now recognize as exploding corpse syndrome. These ancient Chinese nobility seeking immortality were sealed in airtight jade armor suits consisting of thousands of jade plates sewn together with gold or silver wire, designed to preserve the body eternally. However, this practice inadvertently created perfect conditions for anaerobic bacteria to thrive. Detailed analysis of tomb residue by researchers from Beijing University revealed that these bacteria, particularly Clostridium perfringens, produced methane, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon dioxide during decomposition at such high concentrations that the sealed chambers essentially became pressure vessels. Measurements of fracture patterns on jade suits recovered from tombs near Suzhou indicate internal pressures reached approximately 20 atmospheres, comparable to a modern pressure cooker, before catastrophically failing. Historical texts from the later Han period contain cryptic references to tomb thunders and ancestral disturbances that may reference this phenomenon. The explosions were so powerful that tomb workers occasionally reported hearing subterranean rumbling, attributing it to angry spirits or dragons guarding the tombs. In the high monasteries of Tibet, a musical tradition utilizing human remains has existed for over 1,000 years. The kangling, a ritual trumpet crafted from human femur bones. These instruments, whose name literally translates to leg flute, are specifically fashioned from the thigh bones of those who died violently or from infectious disease, as Tibetan Buddhist belief holds that these individuals carry particularly potent spiritual energy. Historical records from the Nyingma sect, dating to the 8th century, detail the precise requirements for a ritual-appropriate bone, ideally from a 16-year-old female who died during childbirth or from a male criminal who was executed by beheading. Crafting a kangling involves a complex 49-day process where the bone is cleaned using sacred river water, consecrated with mantras, boiled with specific herbs to purify it, and then dried in sunlight for specific durations. The ends are typically adorned with copper or silver fittings, often decorated with turquoise and coral inlays representing the 5 elements of Tibetan cosmology. When played during Chod rituals, the kangling produces a distinctive, penetrating wail believed to attract dakinis, female sky spirits, and hungry ghosts. Ethnomusicologists have recorded frequencies between 2,000 to 4,000 Hz produced by these instruments, a range particularly effective at cutting through the dense incense smoke and echoing prayer halls of Himalayan monasteries. Aokigahara Forest, sprawling across 35 square kilometers at the northwestern base of Mount Fuji, harbors a darkness deeper than its dense tree canopy suggests. Since the 1950s, when Japanese writer Seicho Matsumoto featured the forest in his novel Kuroi Jukai, Black Sea of Trees, it has drawn hundreds of individuals annually who enter with no intention of returning. The forest's geological uniqueness contributes to its eerie atmosphere, formed over volcanic lava from Mount Fuji's 864 CE eruption. The ground is comprised of hardened igneous rock that absorbs sound and disrupts compass readings due to natural magnetic iron deposits. Local police reports document that annual body discovery counts began rising dramatically in the 1970s, with rangers now conducting monthly sweeps specifically for recovery purposes. Environmental analysis reveals why bodies decompose unusually slowly. Here, the combination of cool temperatures under the dense canopy and high soil acidity preserves remains far longer than typical forest environments. Psychologists who have studied the phenomenon note that many who enter leave behind personal effects at the forest's edge or mark their path with plastic tape, suggesting ambivalence and a desire to be found. Official signs at forest entrances, installed by Japanese authorities in 2008, display messages like, "Your life is a precious gift from your parents," and provide suicide prevention hotline numbers. Forest workers report finding personal journals with entries that span days. Behind the immaculate skeletons displayed in natural history museums exists a macabre workforce, colonies of dermestid beetles, Dermestes maculatus, that meticulously strip flesh from bone with surgical precision. These specialized scavengers, measuring just 5 to 10 millimeters in length, can transform a fully fleshed specimen into a pristine skeleton in mere days. The American Museum of Natural History maintains a colony of approximately 100,000 beetles in a controlled environment where temperature is maintained at exactly 82 degrees Fahrenheit and humidity at 40 to 60%, optimal conditions for efficient tissue consumption. Museum technicians prepare specimens by removing major muscle groups and organs before placing them in the beetle colony, allowing these tiny workers to access every crevice and joint that human tools cannot reach without damaging delicate bones. A single dermestid beetle can consume twice its body weight in tissue daily, and their larvae are even more voracious, equipped with specialized mandibles that can process cartilage and tendons that adults cannot. The colonies are carefully isolated behind double-door systems and mesh screens, as a dermestid beetle escape could devastate museum collections of preserved specimens, textiles, and papers. After the beetles complete their work, each bone is carefully degreased using enzymatic solutions, as the beetles leave behind natural oils that would eventually turn specimens yellow. This cleaning method, first developed by entomologist Gilbert Wright in 1931. In 1453, a meticulous account in the Turin Cathedral archives describes a local thief who stole a consecrated communion host during the Easter celebration, hiding it in his saddlebag. According to contemporary documents, when the thief reached the town of Exil, his horse suddenly stopped and collapsed, drawing a crowd of onlookers. When the saddlebag was opened, witnesses reported seeing the host hovering above the ground, emanating a brilliant light and weeping tears of blood that pooled beneath it. The blood-stained host was carefully collected by clergy and returned to Turin in a solemn procession. Physician reports from the time describe the thief suffering a mysterious ailment, his body becoming rigid, blood seeping from his pores before his death 3 days later. The blood-stained host, preserved in a specialized reliquary designed by goldsmith Antonio Bertola in 1672, became known as the Miracolo del Sacramento and drew thousands of pilgrims annually. Historical records indicate that during the plague outbreaks of the 1600s, the relic was paraded through Turin's streets, and neighborhoods that received this blessing reportedly experienced lower mortality rates. Scientific analysis conducted discreetly in the 1970s suggested the red substance contained hemoglobin-like compounds. Though the Church has not permitted comprehensive modern testing, the site of the miracle in Turin has been marked by a specialization church, the Basilica of Corpus Domini, constructed specifically to house the relic. In ancient Chinese tradition, the practice of Minghun, or ghost marriage, ensured that unmarried souls would not wander the afterlife alone. Archaeological evidence from Han Dynasty tombs, 206 BCE, 220 CE, reveals elaborate joint burials where deceased bachelors were posthumously married to women who had also died unmarried. These ceremonies involved detailed rituals, including the exchange of burial gifts, ceremonial tablets, and specially crafted funeral attire for both deceased parties. Historical records from the Song Dynasty, 960 to 1279 CE, document that families would hire professional matchmakers who specialized in arranging suitable matches between deceased individuals, considering social status, age at death, and cause of death as important factors in compatibility. The practice became so established that specialized markets emerged where families could purchase ritual items specifically for ghost weddings. In particularly troubling cases documented in provincial records from the Qing dynasty, grave robbers would exhume recently buried young women to sell as ghost brides, commanding prices that sometimes exceeded a family's annual income. Detailed analysis of ghost marriage burial sites shows that the corpses were often positioned to mimic wedding postures, with hands placed together and bodies aligned to suggest matrimonial unity. While officially banned in modern China, anthropological studies from remote villages in the 1990s documented that the tradition continued in modified form. In the damp cellars and granaries of medieval Germany, one of nature's most disturbing anomalies was occasionally discovered: the rat king. These grotesque formations occur when multiple rats become inextricably tangled together by their tails, forming a single writhing mass that moves as one nightmarish entity. The largest verified specimen preserved in the Mauritiana Museum in Altenburg, Germany, consists of 32 rats permanently fused into a circular pattern. Researchers have determined that these formations occur when rats nest too closely in winter months, and their tails become entangled with sticky substances like tree sap, blood, or ice, which then hardens. The entangled rats, unable to separate, adapt to their connected state, surviving by functioning as a collective organism. Medieval German records show that discovering a rat king was considered an omen of impending plague or famine, with some communities documenting them in town records as harbingers of disaster. A particularly detailed account from 1563 in Thuringia describes a rat king found in a miller's cellar just weeks before a devastating outbreak of disease. Scientific analysis of preserved specimens reveals evidence of adaptation to their connected state, with teeth marks showing how the rats would feed each other when some could reach food while others couldn't. Throughout rural England, particularly in ancient manor houses dating back to the 16th and 17th centuries, a peculiar phenomenon persists: the presence of human skulls that supposedly scream when removed from their designated resting places. At Bettiscombe Manor in Dorset, the most famous example houses a skull believed to belong to a West African slave who died in the 1700s. According to detailed local records, when the skull was once removed from the manor, terrifying phenomena ensued. Objects hurled across rooms by unseen forces, doors slamming violently, and most disturbingly, an unearthly wailing that echoed throughout the countryside. The skull was quickly returned, and the disturbances ceased immediately. Similar documented cases exist at Burton Agnes Hall in Yorkshire and Wardley Hall in Lancashire, where skulls have become permanent, protected fixtures of these historic homes. Historical researchers have traced some of these skulls to execution victims whose final wishes demanded they remain within certain properties. Local magistrates' records from the 18th century often mention these skulls as legal fixtures of the estates, with some property deeds specifically mentioning their presence as non-removable items. Archaeological examination of several specimens reveals they're often stained dark brown from centuries of exposure to fireplace smoke,